At what point on May 22nd, 2011, did you have a sense that a major storm was coming into Joplin?
Well, Preston, we were sitting in our house just north side of Joplin. It was in Joplin, almost in what's called Webb City. And my church that I pastor is in the south side of the city, a place called Shoal Creek. And the tornado ripped right through the middle of town. So
Wow.
I heard the rain, I heard the hail. I went outside and it was hail. And I remember praying, Lord, I pray my windshield doesn't get popped out with this hail. And then I get a phone call a little bit later that, are you okay? Are you safe? It's like, yeah, it was just a hailstorm. To which my friend said, no, I think it was more than that. So I walked outside and all of a sudden, just in a few moments, I realized all I saw from my porch was just the hail. Immediately, I felt guilty that my only prayer was for my own car in the hailstorm, not knowing it was anything worse than that, if that makes sense.
Wow.
You know, the tornado sirens go off, but if you live in the Midwest, you kind of get accustomed to it. Anytime wind gets over like 80 miles an hour, they go off. You know, this was more than that, of course. So, you know.
And was that kind of your disposition? You heard the sirens go off, and I mean, was it sort of the thought in the back of your mind, been here before, we've heard the sirens a lot over the years?
Yes, absolutely. And but then I saw the hail, but I've been through hailstorms before too.
Sure. Did you have the news on?
We were watching ESPN and nothing broke in.
Okay. Wow.
I forget what I was watching, but I know it was ESPN.
Sure. So you were north of the storm then. You said your church was south of the storm. So did the tornado sort of rip right between where you lived and where your church was, or was your church hit?
No, you're exactly right. I was barely north, and our church was barely south. And we're talking, you know, a tenth of a mile both directions.
Wow.
At the girth of if you know it, I mean, imagine at the girth of it was a mile wide, and it ripped through 6 miles of Joplin. So 6 miles long at the girth, 1 mile wide. And where that 1 mile marker was close to where I lived at.
Wow. Did you hear it go by, or?
Hailstorm.
So you heard the hailstorm, but you didn't hear, you know, what a lot of people refer to as sort of a train, either a train right on you or a train in the distance. You didn't really hear that.
No, I mean, we're probably in our basement where our TV room is at for most of it, and it came up and did that. And like I said, once again, these storms just come and go. And this one, you know, came and went. Now, all my friends had different accounts, of course. This is just my personal account.
Sure. When did you become aware that actually it was a much, much bigger thing than what you originally thought?
Well, when all the phone calls came in, literally right after. And I remember telling my wife, Becky, something happened. And then she started seeing it. Facebook hit up, and then news came in. So we're talking moments. Moments. And so I quickly realized this is big. I had an intern staying with me. So I have twin sons. I have 4 kids, by the time twins that were teenagers. And I said, all right, one of you go with my intern Isaac, one go with me. And we'll take 2 different routes and try to get to the church. And so we head out south. Like I said, I didn't get out of my subdivision before I started seeing damage. And we head down what's called Range Line, which is one of the main corridors in Joplin.
Right.
And quickly realized, hey, this is going to be harder. So my intern went, his name is Isaac. Isaac went a little bit further east through a community called Duquesne and one main road. And he was able to navigate that better. I went straight through Range Line. And I went down to where, because I lived in a subdivision off Range Line. We're talking, you know, maybe a mile in, it's getting really bad. About a mile and a half in, I get past the mall, past this thing called Four Corners there. Forest Park Church was there. The mall was there. It's bad, but we're still going. But I get down to where the Walmart, the Chili's is, and trees and power lines are just down. So I cut through the neighborhoods to get there, and everything was like one lane because of trees and stuff. So I jump out of my truck, my SUV. I put my teenage boy, who wasn't supposed to drive yet, but knew how to drive. I think he was 14 or 12, 13. I said, hey, drive up here, wait for me. He did. And I directed traffic for about 20 minutes just to clear up the congestion. And then people jumped out and pulled some trees away because everyone was trying to get to someplace.
So as you're making your way down Rangeline, and by this point you've already seen the Walmart.
Yeah, but yeah.
I mean, so you know that this has been a massive
Well, you
storm.
knew before I got to Walmart, because I mean, not only were trees down, but tree limbs were everywhere, and then leaves were everywhere, and then debris was everywhere, and it was just a mess everywhere. But the closer you got toward Walmart, that was of course a bad part. And right across the street from Walmart, there was a boat, like a John boat, like a little flat bottom boat that was stuck in a tree across the street from Walmart.
Yeah.
Cars were turned upside down. There's a car upside down, glass. Some of these stores, there was some type of Payless shoes or something that was, I forget the name of the store. I think it's Payless, but nonetheless, it was there. Things are broken in, glass are broken in, cars flipped over. There was a car wrapped around a pole right there across the street from Walmart. So, and Walmart sets off the road a little bit if you've been there.
Yeah.
So you really couldn't see a lot, but you can just tell there was a lot of damage. That's when I turned the other way to try to get to the church. It took me, well, it usually took me about 10, 15 minutes. It took me over an hour, just because I was having to stop and get out, clean the road, direct traffic to get to the church.
So you jumped out to direct traffic there, and I want to ask you, what motivated you to do that? And and the reason I asked is, was there kind of this impulse, like I've heard other people say that there's the shock of what you originally see, and then the next thing is, okay, so what do? We have to do something.
Right.
Is that kind of what it was for you, or was it just, somebody just needs to direct traffic, so it might as well be me? Or was it more of a, I need to do something, and here's something I can do?
I guess all of that. Nothing you said was wrong, and there's a portion of everything you said that was definitely resonating. With me, it was like I had to get to the church because to me that was going to become my ground zero. Right. I wasn't worried about the building so much as that's where people I knew would go. That's what churches are there, right? They go to there for shelter. And sure enough, they were there, but it wasn't going to move. I mean, there was traffic jam, and the police can't get there because I'm there. I can't do anything else. I mean, it's just so if I didn't do it, it wasn't going to get done. And no one else jumped out of the car because there was probably that shock. And like, this is something we can do. I didn't plan on staying there all day, and I didn't. I only stayed there for enough to clear up the jams. But that's what happened. We did that. And there's that initial shock time, right? And it's when you gather yourself and your family really quick. But then here's the cool thing about Joplin, man. And maybe it's just Midwest America, part of America. People jumped in like right away helping. I mean, I feel like my core group, my church, most of them came there. Now, some of them were first responders and couldn't, but a lot of people came to church and like, hey, what are we going to do? And so
now, are you saying that, did a call go out, come to the church, or was this just an impulse people had just to go to the church because they knew that there's just kind of everyone just kind of instinctively, or whatever the right word is, they just knew that a lot of work's going to need to be done, and some of it's going to be done by our church, so let's go there and start.
So we're talking in the minutes after the tornado, right? We're not talking a day. We're talking right after. There was no central command center, there was nothing. Now within a few hours they were popping up, but we're talking right away there wasn't. So I let people check on their family, check on themselves, then checked on their families, checked on their businesses maybe, but then they made their way over to their church. Not just my church, I assume they did the others. And that's why I was there by that time. We had our generators kicked in. We had people showing up who lost everything, people we didn't even know. So we quickly cleaned out some rooms, set some cots up and that kind of stuff. And of course, no electricity, everything was shot. So we had to do things differently, get gas, the generators and that kind of stuff. So we immediately went to that. There's a disaster relief, then there's disaster recovery. So right there, your relief, man, what can we do right now? Kind of the rescue.
Yeah.
So people started showing up within minutes. Oh no. So we're there. And then people showing up, we're trying to figure out what to do. I get my core group around me and say, call everybody make sure your family's safe, and then start calling the widows and the elderly that don't have people to check on them. And then by then you can kind of tell too, like the path, because enough people showed up like, hey, my house wasn't hit, or I'm like, well, I'm from this part, my house wasn't hit, but I saw this. So just because of those points, we can tell without any news. Okay, well, the south side is okay and the north side's okay, then it must have been through this pattern. So you start calling people that you think were probably living in that area. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And roughly how many folks, well, first, what church was it?
I pastored the Calvary Baptist Church in Joplin, Missouri on 50th Street, just south of the highway.
Okay. And do you know roughly how many in your congregation, how many folks had their homes seriously damaged or destroyed in the tornado? Just guessing?
Yeah, it's been a couple of days.
Yeah.
Out of the 158 people who died, 2 of them were connected to my church. I had 2 connections. We had in the high 20s of people who had significant damage, maybe 30 that had significant damage. A lot of people had a little damage. I had hail damage, right? So I don't count that. But so mission teams started showing up the next day, well, actually that night. So we said, hey, I need you to go check on my people first. What can you do? So we'll check on my people and then we'll find things to do. So they checked on our 30-something families.
These are mission teams from outside of town?
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah. Well, I mean, our people mobilized all over the country. I have a lot of contacts in Northwest Arkansas. I was on staff at a church called Cross Church, and they sent teams up right away. People started showing up. I remember one family came from Montana, and they stayed there. Another family from Texas, and they stayed in our church for a couple months, just helping out wherever.
Wow. I want to ask about, so I want to come back to your church, but before we do that, I just want to ask you about what you remember seeing. You described as you're making your way down Range Line, you described you see the boat wrapped around the tree, the car wrapped around the tree, or the SUV, whatever it was, wrapped around the tree. The cars overturned, the stores destroyed. Do you have any recollections of seeing people walking around?
Yeah, I do. And the boat was up in the tree, by the way, 20 feet up in the air. It stayed there for a week or 2. There's pictures of it around.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It was surreal. So like homes, it's hard to explain. Literally reduced to toothpicks. It was hard. Apartment complexes reduced to toothpicks. And you see people not dressed for it, like shorts and t-shirt and flip-flops and walking around like that.
And were they kind of, I didn't realize you were in your car, you saw them from some distance, but did they seem to be in kind of that dazed state? Or?
Yeah. So when I saw everything. That night, within a few hours, it got dark, and disaster relief came to our church parking lot and made ground zero there, disaster search and rescue. And I walked over to him, saying, I'm pastor church, what can I do? Say, hey, we just need to keep all of our equipment here as a base and then launch out of here and come back here. Like, hey, whatever you need, church is open. You can do whatever you need. And so I said, hey, can I jump in with you guys? And they said, you can follow behind us. Mm-hmm. And so I followed behind them. And so they went in first and looking for bodies and people. And Then I went in behind them with Southern Baptist Disaster Relief and some other guys, some volunteer firemen. And we were just looking to see if they missed anybody or anything. And we ran across a couple of people that, were looters and ran them off. And I don't know if they're looters so much as just teenagers, just being teenagers running around. So anyway, went into that right away. And people were either in go mode, like these volunteer firemen, like I was in that moment, because your family's safe, secure. So now you can give yourself away. Or you're in shock, people sitting there crying or just shock. Saw some people look, they're trying to pick up, you got to realize, your subdivision there, you got your distinguished lot lines, and now it's all just blurred. So you got people trying to pick up their lot lines, but it's just futile because it's so small. And
just trying to figure out where their house ends and the other house starts, kind of thing, or
right. Trees don't fall perfectly on your lot, they fall over things and stuff. And you got a couple of guys who got out right away with their chainsaws and able to do some work. And I'm just telling you, right away, people started doing stuff.
Wow.
Which was good.
Describe in general terms sort of what happens to your church as it becomes a center of response activity over the next, let's say, over the next 3, 4, 5 days.
Next 3, 4, 5 days was intense. I pretty much lived there. No, I did live there. I went home and showered and came back, stayed there overnight. We opened up portions of the church for people who had no place to go. Our cook staff came in and started cooking meals. Within a week, they had logged their 10,000th meal. And they said, Pastor, can we stop counting meals? Because we hit 10,000. I'm like, yes, what are you going to do? So people started showing up for a place to live. Now, it took about a couple of days for them to get the Red Cross shelter set up. Now, they had relief right away, but we had dozens of families, and then down to a dozen families, down to 1 or 2. And within a week, I think all those families left. But what increased, though, we had 2 sanctuaries, a small one, a big one. And a mission team came in. I went to them and they said, hey, what can we do around here? We got some people who aren't dressed to go out. We didn't realize all the nails and debris. Yeah. I said, well, if you can take all the pews out of this small sanctuary and stack them, then we'll put cots in here. And it was my 5th Sunday, by the way. And they're like, all right, I like the way you move. So they did. They took them out. This is about 2 days later, stuck them up in the corners. And then this is happening so fast. A friend of mine worked at University of Arkansas, Jonathan Beasley. They had just got a hold of a whole bunch of mattresses because one of the dorms, they rechained mattresses. And he called me, he said, do you need those? Like, actually, I can take about 150. So he brought them up and they put mattresses all across the sanctuary. And then for the next, several weeks, but we're talking just a few days afterwards, we had a whole operation going, man. We had a cot, people to stay in a cot. We only had like 1 or 2 showers in the church, but that wasn't a huge deal. I had a cot for them to sleep and meals there to eat. And we just housed mission teams for weeks. The month of June was a blur because that's all it was in June. And the first 2 weeks is intense the most, huh?
These are teams coming in from out of state or from elsewhere in Missouri. All
over. And they're not just Baptist, they're not just Christian either. Most of them were churches because they knew to go. And they knew me, or they knew somebody, or they knew of our church. There's always these points of connectivity. And they showed up. So what else showed up too was just donations. Just started showing up. So I have a friend, his name's Craig Miller. He's since passed away, but I called him. He was about to go to Haiti to do some disaster relief, still from the Haiti earthquake that happened a few years earlier. Said, man, I need some help. This is big. So he cancels his flight, comes up there, and just starts he did disaster relief in Katrina, and he helped me through it. And he started saying, hey, don't take these things because you will never be able to give them away, but take this and this. So we just kind of put the blurb out there on social media. This is what we can take. And that just spread. And by that Sunday, of course, it happened on Sunday. By that next Sunday, we had 13 tractor trailer rigs in the parking lot of our church. One of them was a Tyson chicken, refrigerated. It was packed full of chicken. And the guy, they sent a cook up every day to cook just tenderloins for whoever wanted to eat. So they offset our food, and so
This is
people
the
coming in. Tyson chicken. Yeah.
Tyson sent somebody up to do the cooking for you?
They sent up a diesel. They dropped a refrigerator, the big 53-foot refrigerator deal. And every day they sent up this guy, and he came up every day, and he just cooked with this big mobile cooker, tenderloins, chicken tenders for just, and they box them up. They have those little styrofoam things. They pick them up and take them out all throughout Joplin to workers. So I'm sure there's other ones doing that. Other people came to our church to do that too. But Tyson, or some friends of ours, Donnie Smith was the CEO at the time. He's a friend, and they did that. Walmart dropped stuff off. I'm gonna forget. I shouldn't start naming things, but
yeah,
we had 13 rigs. I mean, so much water bottles, and then supplies just came in. And we went into our church. Those mission teams, they took nice little classrooms. They put in shelves. We had classrooms, one just for medical stuff, one for toiletries, and we just became a supply center. And word got out.
wow.
I'm just telling you, it just overtook the thing.
Yeah.
And the benevolence part of it,
What you do,
So anyway,
yeah, you're reinforcing a story I've heard a number of times. Just as you think about this whole experience, is it possible to imagine? Well, I don't know, how do I put the question? So I guess this would be more of a thought experiment, but when you take the response to Joplin, and as you remember it, to the Joplin tornado, suppose that we were in a community where there weren't that many churches, where there weren't that many people who went to church, so a pretty unchurched community. Do you think the response would have been dramatically different?
my answer to you is yes and no. I think there's a heart of compassion, especially in the moralistic countries like America, and places like us that have a moral fiber of us, especially ones that have a fear of God and a love of man. So I think that would happen. So I do think there's a response. However, the fact that the church was there was like the mobilized was already, and I said before, the church is on the front line. They're there before the tragedy. They go further than anyone else, and they stay longer than everyone else. And that's what we were. We were there first, we were the furthest, and we stayed the longest.
How long did it go on?
Huh?
How long was it before your church got back to what it had been like on May 21st?
I don't know. I mean, it changed us forever. Which was good. Every church needs to adapt to the needs of its community.
Yeah.
That was in May. We worked really hard in June and July. I finally took some time off the end of July. I was burnt out. I think I had a heat stroke. I was just working so hard, and I went away for a couple of days. By that fall, the high school met in the mall, shopping mall, and I had kids here in high school, right, or middle school at the time.
Yeah.
And they met in the shopping mall, and so it was a while for the whole town, if ever. I mean, you can drive through Joplin today. I can still show you empty lots where I knew a house at,
Right.
So some things never get back the same. One thing we did, all the sports fields were destroyed. I say all, if not all, most of them.
Yeah.
So there's no summer sports, and no church is going to have VBS right now, right?
Vacation Bible School. Yeah.
Which is a huge deal for parents to
Sure.
have that. So we didn't do ours. I said, guys, we have our land. Let's do a sports camp. And so we did a sports camp. Oh, Preston, we had, hundreds and hundreds of kids came. Professional baseball players came by and spoke, just to encourage them. Alan Roach and Kansas City Chiefs, Kansas City Royals, all gave stuff. People came from University of Arkansas, Shiloh Christian School, and just did things. And we had this phenomenal sports camp, which was a great relief. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't They needed something. So it was cool. We did some cool things like that for the community.
Yeah.
And the Harley Davidson riders came through. They did a
Yeah.
huge fundraiser. I think they had 800 Harleys that came, and they all met in our church parking lot. We had a big parking lot. And
Let me just ask you, I want to ask about the Harleys and then just one question after that, and I'll let you go. So tell me about this Harley Davidson event.
we would get calls from everybody that want to use our
Yeah.
church for fundraiser, what have you. And it's called a trail in Arkansas. It's a certain road out to the mountains. And they want to do a ride that started in Arkansas. It ended up at our church in Joplin, and all the money raised goes to Joplin Relief. And they raised several $1,000s. And they walk in our church, man, all the leathers, and our parking lot was so cool. Just hundreds of Harley Davidson and other motorcycles too, of course, but they raised just thousands of dollars and they donated to the Joplin Relief Fund. And so our church was able to host that Stream Home Makeover. If you watch those episodes, all the videos were filmed in our church. So many concerts, Christian concerts, and it was cool. God blessed our church. We had the mayor gave us my filing cabinet a award for helping.
Wow.
And the day people did what, huh?
No, I'm sorry. What did the because Extreme Makeover went to Joplin. I think they rebuilt, was it 5 homes, I think?
7 homes in 7 days. Yeah.
7 homes in 7 days. And they stayed at your church as well, or?
Yeah, they brought in a lot of television programs, HGTV and some other ones came by to do a couple different shows, and they would use our church. So their green room was one of our Sunday school classrooms that they would use, and they just launched all their meetings out of there, had all their planning meetings there, and then they went on site with their trailer and did their work a couple blocks away from our church. But then they had the rally there. They did it, and we used to have a lot of rallies at our. We hosted everything we could host, and
wow.
My memory's fading me because it's almost a blur. And we just threw ourselves out there. It wasn't just me, of course. It was our staff. It was our volunteers. We just threw ourselves out there. We literally gave everything we had to our community for that period of time.
Wow.
And I don't feel that any regret that we could have done more, but there definitely was more that needed to be done. And then the hospital that got blown down, Mercy Hospital, they bought some of our land to build a new hospital. That's beautiful, right across the street. And so we
St. John's did. So your church is close to where St. John's was then?
Not the new one, the old one
Okay.
that flew down is a few miles away, and they needed to relocate. So they bought partial from this person, and partial from us.
I see. Wow. Just one last question. When you look back on this whole period, from thinking it's, just a hailstorm to immediately finding out it's much bigger than that, to driving down Range Line, seeing all of the destruction, you're directing the traffic. Now you've got this relief work that's immediately underway. Your church becomes a center for all of this activity. It might be an unfair question, and there may not be one particular thing, but the question is, what is there a particular thing that most stands out in your memory when you look back on that whole period? Or if there are a few things, could you pick one of those things, something that really stands out in your memory when you reflect back on this whole time?
I only get one.
Feel free to give me more than one. I'd love to hear them, but. Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of quick ones. I did a Fox News interview that Monday night, standing with debris behind me. And I was with another gentleman who's a politician, talking in big, and trying to be encouraging, but talking in vague generalities about things. And then they say, "Oh, Pastor Graves, you're a pastor, what do you think?" And I remember saying, details like you're asking specifics. But then I had just a little bit of editorial there at the end. I said, well, let me say this: Joplin's strong. Joplin's going to rebuild, and we're not done. We're not over. This hasn't changed us. This is going to make us grow. We're going to grow from this. And you just wait and see. I think Joplin's going to surprise America, because this is But there's not a lot of weak-minded people here. We really care for one another. And man, it just came so prophetically true because there's a really cool story of a lot of people waiting for insurance money to come through, you know, and you're supposed to do some of that. And a lot of families found they're underinsured, and that's when FEMA kicked in. So there's a lot of work with that, right? One guy whose wife had a beauty salon, just a simple stand-alone building. On Monday, he got his truck and his tractor, scraped the pad off, started framing, started rebuilding. And then by Tuesday, people are still in shock and awe. And here's this guy out there with a hammer and 2x4s, and he's just rebuilding. He's reframing. I mean, we're less than 48 hours away. He's already framing up his wife's beauty salon. Wow. And like, that's what I'm talking about. And when it comes to spiritual things, there's so many stories of people who could have died, didn't die. I remember one story of one mission team, though. We sent a team to a house, one of our members, and everything was disarray. Toothpicks, 2x4s and toothpicks. The lady, elderly lady, one of our older ladies sat on her couch. She's physically impossible to make it to a shelter. I mean, it's just so fast. So she takes her pillow and puts her pillow over her head, puts her head in her lap. And then behind her is a picture of the Lord's Supper. You know, the traditional picture of the Lord's Supper falls in her head.
Wow.
On the pillow. Doesn't hurt her. And she looks up when it's over and the house is gone. And so she's telling the story. And she was there. Her name was, I think her name was Cherry Noble. And she was there. Yeah, she was there. Head in her lap, pillow on her head, Lord's Supper picture on top of her head, house is gone. And she stands up and tells a story that next Sunday. Powerful time. Another lady, just disarray. And our team walks up. What can we do? You do okay? Can we help you? And she's crying. She goes, I can't find my wedding ring. I take them off at night and put them on my nightstand. And I just can't find it. And they look and they say, let's pray. And they gathered in a circle. There's, you know, maybe a dozen people total now looking. They gathered in a circle, held hands, and they prayed, Lord, would you lead us to this wedding ring? And true story. And they got it done. And one of the members, I don't know which one it was, looked down to their feet, bent over, picked it up and said, is this it? And she just lost it. Yeah, it was. Things like that wouldn't have happened if people wouldn't take the time to be compassionate and give of themselves just to stop and pray and look and just be aware of what the Lord was doing.
All right, joining me now from Joplin, Missouri, which tonight is ground zero for the single deadliest storm in this country in 60 years, State Representative Bill White. This is his district, and Pastor Brad Graves of the Calvary Baptist Church. Welcome to both of you.
Bill, next to Brad. Okay.
There you go. Can you guys hear me? Oh, there you are.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Wow. I'm just looking at the scene but behind you guys.
Okay.
Everything is completely flattened. Congressman White, Bill White, tell me what you were doing when the storm hit.
I had to get the mics right.
My family was at IHOP. We had about 8 of us there. It got really dark. I went outside to see what was going on in the storm. Saw a little tornado off to the northeast, very small up in the air. Went back in and said, there's a tornado. It looks like it's going north of us. I went back out. It was a huge wall of rain coming towards us. Watched it for a second, and then something white a couple hundred feet in the air just went from left to right, horizontal to the ground, so I knew it was a tornado. I ran back in and just told everybody to, take cover. Got the people that work there started, got people moving. I went up to the tables and said, you've really got to go to the back. There's a tornado here now. We had old people trying to take their food with them because we get a lot of tornadoes here. I just said, put it down, don't go back for your purse. We got them inside the kitchen area. As soon as we all got in there, the tornado hit, shouted for everybody to get down. My 11-year-old was on the bottom, my wife and me in one corner. Some of my relatives were in the freezer. We had probably about 30, 40 people in there. And
but you survived.
The walls started blowing out.
You survived.
We survived. It was
sounds like it was a very scary situation.
It was it had a lot of wind, and my legs started getting lifted up, not by a suction, but just the wind blowing through it.
Wow.
And you know, you had the pressure changing, your ears popped. When it was lasted maybe 40 seconds, it seemed like. When we got up and went, the wall where the seating area was gone, the front wall was caved in. We had, fortunately, just very minor injuries, cuts, bruises. The two buildings next door destroyed the home.
Thank goodness for that. That is certainly the good news. I want to turn to Pastor Graves. You know, how are the folks in your congregation coping with this? I'm looking at the scene behind you, and there's nothing to see. Everything's flat.
It really is. It's devastating, and it's a fact. We did some major assessment. We had about 30 families in our church who either lost everything or some significant damage. And so we set up a care center, Calvary Baptist Care Center in our church, and we've been having some hospitality, people coming in. Some of the families are just shaken up because they survived this storm. And then even last night, another major storm came through and it rattled them again some more. So they're rattled, they're shaken, but Joplin's strong people. They need help, but by the same token, they're making through this pretty well.
Well, that's good to hear. Bill, are you getting support from FEMA? I mean, what are you seeing, the response from state and federal government? Is it good there?
We've got great response. The people on the ground here are doing wonderful. Our city, state, the federal level. It's just so overwhelming. This is 6 miles long and 3/4 of a mile wide. We've got 10 to 15 blocks that are just totally devastated, and then it fans out a little bit more on the south for another 5 to 10 blocks for varying degrees of damage. We've got 7,000 units, housing units and businesses that are gone. And
wow.
You know, I'm estimating that's 15,000 people that don't have places to live and work anymore. Our St. John's, as you've seen over in the hospital to our left, the CEO told me that's actually, that 9-story tower is off its foundation. And they're not in there, they're down at Memorial Hall. Freeman across the way, they've handled 500-600 patients. Sent a lot of them, the ones that were stable, they sent out. They've been overwhelmed.
Well,
but the government's, you know, governor's been in, a lot of support.
it was an F5 storm that hit Joplin, 198 miles per hour winds. Doesn't really get much faster than that. Pastor, what are you telling people to try to reassure them at this point? I mean, you know, it's one thing to lose your home. It's another thing when everybody you know loses their home.
Absolutely, and our message has been that, you know, the God we believe in is a God of redemption, and a God is interested in redeeming their lives and redeeming them through the situation, and we believe that, and that's how come. That's a message that we've established. We established a website at joplinneedsyou.com, and that is just our forefront opportunity to be able to tell people that God loves you, God needs you, God wants to redeem not just your life but this whole situation. And there's hope, and there really is. And so the people that we're talking with and communicating with are seeking out, searching out. We're giving them hope during this time. It's just, this is the reaction stage. The rebuilding stage comes in the next 2 and 3 weeks, and that'll last for another year or two. And so we just get them through this first initial time, and then we can help rebuild their lives. And that's really what we're about.
Well, I wish all the luck in the world. Our thoughts are with you. Just been devastating there. 122 deaths, all the destruction. You know, the people there are lucky to have you guys. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Jerry.